Good afternoon. I am Monimita Sarkar, the founder of Unmukt. We bring to you the third webinar in the Unmukt knowledge series, Unmukt Cares, Telemedicine, the Future of Care. Now that telemedicine has been officially brought on board, legalized on the 25th of March, it's in a very timely way. It's not only during the lockdown that it's really as a boon to all of us, but moving ahead, what are the implications of this? What are we going to see in our lives today? And seniors, because we work with seniors, which is the most vulnerable segment in the COVID-19 pandemic. So, hospitals, clinic, etc., are really off limits for them. So what do seniors do? And telemedicine is, of course, going to be really critical aid during these times. But telemedicine for seniors is both a boon and a bane. A boon because it is, sort of going to keep them in their homes for non-essential hospital visits, for a diabetic checkup, some of those things which can be done in their homes. But it's a bane because there is going to be a huge learning curve to understand the interface and how to manage it. And ladies and gentlemen, I'm delighted to present an exciting lineup of speakers as we seek to understand the new mechanisms in medical consultations, which will become a way of life for all of us. And now I'm pleased to present Dr. Vikram Venkateshwaran, Director, Founder, and Managing Editor, Healthcare India. Mr. Ravi Ramaswamy, Senior Director and Health Systems, Philips. Dr. Neeraj Bhalla, Senior Consultant and Director, BLK Hospital, Delhi. Mr. Vishwanathan, CFO, Novacura Telehealth Services, M5, and Dr. Kiran Bali, St. John's Hospital, Bangalore. So welcome to everybody. Over to you, Vikram.
Sorry. Thank you, Monimita. And I guess no matter how much you are used to digital technology, you still goof up on something. I spoke a few lines on mute. So I hope everybody can see me because kind of the video screen looks frozen. But it's good to be here. Can somebody let me know if we are good? I think we are good, right?
Yeah, we are good.
You're audible. Okay. You're fine.
All right. Excellent. Excellent. So, I love this entire, situation in which telemedicine got such a big boost. In India, as you know, telemedicine has seen many false dawns. I have been following it up for the last 10 years, right from the days Apollo Hospital and I think ISRO, it was to start, did a partnership with a few pilots on how to run telemedicine in India. We went on to other, opportunities where some organizations set up these services, especially for critical care or home monitoring, but it never scaled. It never scaled as a practice, as a platform. It never scaled. What is interesting about telemedicine, in my opinion, and just setting the context, is given the number of doctors we have and the population they have to serve, and given the distribution of this population, mostly in population being in rural areas, the doctors being in urban areas, this was I think a no-brainer. But somehow, things take their own course, and the moment arrived with COVID, and now we have MCI giving an entire document on how to go ahead and get this done. So having said this context, I'm very, very happy that all of you could take time off your busy schedules to come in and discuss telemedicine, mostly in the context of senior care, right? Seniors in our country, which is an ever-growing percentage of the population now, they've had their own unique challenges to add to the existing challenges that India has as a country. So I want to start this conversation. I want to, start with Dr. Neeraj Bhalla, and we connected yesterday briefly. We had a interesting discussion. So Dr. Neeraj, you've seen so many patients in your practice, and you've seen so many senior citizens coming to you because of the nature of your practice. What are the one or two things that stand out, which could have caused an issue with proper diagnosis and prognosis, and which you feel now will have a different light? So, just your initial thoughts on what are the challenges you see, and how telemedicine probably is probably a step in the right direction now.
Thank you, Vikram, for that question. And yes, clearly, as you rightly pointed out, the platform or opportunity for telemedicine has been existing for a long time, just hasn't taken off. And the reasons we might now debate, but this is now sort of irrelevant and in the past, very quickly in the past. Clearly, I think for senior citizens, there are so many challenges to access healthcare. Number one, they are the ones who need the most healthcare, but for them to physically obtain a modality starting from transportation from their places of residence, getting through, say, traffic in a large metro, negotiating busy lifts or waiting to climb steps physically handicapped, long waiting hours outside a doctor's clinic, a busy doctor who is not able to give them the kind of time and attention that they desire or they need to satisfy them, leaving many questions unanswered. And as you get older, I've seen older patients are much more diffident in asking their questions. Doctors are much more brusque or short with senior people, and many times their queries remain unanswered. I recently had, only today, I got an obituary notice from one of my older patients. This is an old gentleman whose wife is a doctor, both in their late 80s. The gentleman had multiple problems, none of which were cardiac, or one of them was, it was a minor cardiac problem. But she would always approach me for help because she said no one else is listening to me. So very poignant, very challenging. And I just got a notice that the gentleman died because they could not get a bed in the hospital. So just to exemplify what the problems could be. I have recently started doing telemedicine consultation for my patients, and I find, being a cardiologist, we probably need a lot more information than, say, a psychiatrist needs. And we need to do physical examination. We need to have at least the vital signs. But there are ways that telemedicine has enabled that you may get all this information pre the consultation, and you can do quite a meaningful consultation. One of the very important MCI guidelines, and the first guideline that they pointed out, is that before you do a telemedicine consultation, you must be clear about what is the context in which it is being done. So I believe this word is very important, context. If it is your assessment that the patient needs to go to the hospital, you should stop the teleconsultation there and advise the patient to do that. Secondly, they have also emphasized on what should be the kind of medication that might be prescribed. So the possibility for abuse of narcotic or psychotropic drugs is clearly, it's prescribed in these guidelines. You cannot advise the patient to take them. Thirdly, they have emphasized on patient privacy and the need to maintain the patient's documents in a confidential manner, not release them without their consent. So these could be some of the challenges that senior citizens face, and they could be within the framework of the guidelines of telemedicine that the government has laid down. I'm sure we can offer many solutions. The last point I want to make is that I have been doing teleconsultation for my patients for the last 3 or 4 days. I took a conscious decision that for 1 month, I will consult all my patients remotely without any charges. But I realized going ahead that you need to have a physical interface, you need to spend time. So we set up this teleconsultation platform, and I have been doing these consultations and for the last few days, and I find a sense of satisfaction for me also as a doctor that I'm able to fulfill or satisfy what I would physically be doing through teleconsultation also. So it's working both ways. I also have a sense that I'm able to deliver what I would like to deliver to the patient through this platform.
Excellent, doctor. I think that's a very interesting, sequence of events and very well articulated as well. So let me bring you in, Ravi. We've probably discussed this for the last 10 years in various forums, personal discussions. Uh, but realistically speaking, you've seen more technology adoption than probably all of us put together, right? Because of your years in GE and then eventually at Philips. Uh, what is stopping a patient or a caregiver to slipping back to the old ways? How do you keep this adoption going? I think my fear is tomorrow lockdown ends and we are back to standing in line.
Uh, I think that's a great question, Vikram, Dr. Vikram. One of the things that I have been seeing is, take for example, the economic reforms that Manmohan Singh brought in. Everybody said that the change in government is going to push things back. Did it? The answer is no. You look at mobility, they felt that mobile telephones is not going to be, could never replace the toll quality calls that you would have on a landline. Did that fallacy remain? No. We always thought that that ATM card and availability of cash worldwide is always going to be a challenge. Technology has proved it otherwise. I think I can give you enough and more instances as to how these large changes have actually been initiated and they have continued ad infinitum. I think Corona is once in a lifetime situation that mankind faces, and that's going to change back the whole way of working. Let me give you one concrete example as to prove why this is not. You know that Philips, we are building up a huge new building in Bangalore. So now, post-COVID, the discussions are around saying, hey, how do you enable work from home under any circumstance out here? How are you going to build in the social distancing norm into 600,000 square feet of space? So that thought has already started percolating down the line, saying, guys, this is something that we are going to take care of. There are also other trends in the world that is going to dictate this. Like, for example, I have been working very closely with my Japanese colleagues. One of the things that is happening is longevity is increasing and the birth rate is decreasing. Consequent to this, the payment ratio of the younger population taking care of the old is sort of inverted out there. Given that fact, you also find that 99% of the hospitals there are running at a loss. You'll be surprised to hear this, 99%. Now, given all this, you find that we have been working on a telemedicine proposal with them, and that seems to be the thing that matters most for them. In terms of how do I move the chronic patient out of the hospital into their home so that I reduce the cost, I reduce the infection burden, and I also keep them in an environment that they are familiar with. Come back to India, the situation is going to be the same. Post-COVID, COVID is not something that is a switch that will go off in about 2 months or 3 months. That thing is here to stay. And given that social distancing norms have to be followed, commute is going to be that much less. Telemedicine and the entire plumbing that requires the infrastructure to be run, like for example, your portability of data, your digital EHR, EMR, HIS, what have you. I think the government of India has also taken upon itself to really push the cost on digitization to the next level, just the way that they did with what they did in the finance industry. So the number of actions that are being taken on multiple fronts are so heavy, and people tend to realize the advantages and the benefits that they get out of this. I don't think this is going to reverse back. And of course, there could be enough and more changes that needs to be done in the system to accommodate all of what we want to do, like, for example, faster dispensation of care, the authorization of insurance approvals and stuff like that, the change in norms as to whether the doctor can actually prescribe medication when he's on a remote. Now, those are the things, the legislation that have to come across, but sooner than later, I think telecommunication is here to stay. Telemedicine is there to stay. I don't think it will go away so fast.
Oh, excellent. I did not realize
Long
that.
answer to a short question, Vikram.
But I didn't realize Japanese hospitals were running at a loss. That's an insight.
It's 99% of the hospitals there are running at a loss, be it private, be it public, because they simply cannot afford they're crumbling under their own spend. The GDP spend today is at 12%. 2030, the target is 30%. And that is something that is worse than America and untenable.
Oh, okay. So, Vishwanath, I think it's a great segue to what you do. I mean, you've been providing telemedicine or at least consultation through MFine for a while. And you're very familiar with the user patterns, right? The user behavior, user experience. So 2 questions for you. Ravi says, it's not going to go down, it's going to continue, but it'll also be very dependent on users, how will they continue to adopt and, adopt this new way of seeing the doctor,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
So the 2 questions for you, somewhat related. One is, what is it that you foresee that this adoption will not come down?
Yes. Okay.
Today we are stuck, so we are tele-consultation. I'm sure Dr. Neeraj will have a line outside his house the minute lockdown is lifted, just to see him, because you get a lot of gratification after seeing a doctor.
Yeah.
That is one. And second related question is, what can we do, as doctors and technologists to ensure that this continues, this doesn't die out?
So at MFine, we have been there for now 3 years, building this tool, and we have been working on it, and we have been at a cusp of a paradigm shift. Actually, we hit the storm. COVID is a storm where we are there now with the boat ready to sail as a technology. Just to give some data perspective, whether are people using technology to consult doctors and for what they are consulting doctors on the platform. Our experiences in the last 2 years, there are more than 2 million people who have accessed our tool, and close to 700,000 people have done some form of consultation on the platform and taken a prescription across 23-25 specialties what we work. Primarily, these have been discrete in the initial form. It's been dermatology, psychiatry, andrology, gynec and stuff, pedia. Of late, we are seeing there's orthopedics, cardiology also going well. We work with hospitals. We don't work with direct clinicians on the field, so it's the hospitals which are there, which help us to build that credibility that we are a platform where we offer serious consultations. So one is, yes, people have adopted. In fact, I had a slide which would show that what we have seen is that this platform actually provides access to people where there are no doctors available. If I look at the data of India, pan-India, you will find North India, UP, Bihar, Ranchi, Jharkhand, in these places, the doctor per 1,000 of people is less than 0.3. Whereas the WHO says we should have at least one, or UN says we should have 1 doctor per 1,000. We have less than 0.3. And we're also seeing it is from these places, the people who are mostly accessing all the doctors on our platform. So it sees there's a need of accessibility, which was not there. So I think that's a primary thing which was always there. Now, what COVID has done or what COVID will do for the people. So now we know that because of COVID, children and seniors above 60 or 70 are going to be the most vulnerable population if they come to access to this virus. And hospital is going to be the most infectious place, because now the problem with this disease is it is so asymptomatic. The person who's having it also doesn't know that he's carrying this virus. So when you're into a hospital, this person doesn't know whether you're going to. So a lot of chronic care platforms like diabetes or cardiovascular long-term care, I think there people will continue and will pursue this as a process, because then they know that they are safe. They don't have to, apart from the convenience, affordability and availability of a doctor. And the other thing is telemedicine also brought a lot of convenience. Today on our platform, you can consult real time. So patient doesn't wait. Theoretically, he can get a doctor from morning 7 a.m. to night 1 a.m. Across the platform, the doctor chooses. But if he wants a specific doctor, still he doesn't have to commute. So I think, I don't see post-COVID things are going to change. It's only going to, COVID is like the straw on the camel's back, right? So this is going to now ensure that, for example, the biggest challenges with the hospitals also is hospitals have never thought, they only thought about emergency care and elective care. nobody has thought about infectious care because public health was government's domain. I think hospitals are going to have a huge challenge out there. As a CFO, I see there's a huge problem there, and we have to figure out what's going to happen. I would like to hear from the doctors how they're going to handle that. You are muted, Dr. Vikram.
Yeah, we have to get used to this, because we are all locked down. My kids keep running in and running out. And Dr. Kiran, we've also had so many discussions on this, and we still miss our trips together because we are obviously locked down. And one of the things, if you look at my background, is my kids have painted my walls, right? Jokes aside, I'm hearing, or at least I've read a few articles which says that the mental impact of this lockdown will never leave us in our lifetimes. They're saying that we will come out, it'll be not very unlike the movies where we'll have an army of zombies on the road now because they've been locked in for 40 days. In my case, because I fell ill briefly before the lockdown, I was ill, locked down, and I've been here for I'm nearing 41 days now, right? I haven't stepped outside my house. So Doc, two things for you, right? One is senior citizens have a lot of issues, mental health issues, mental wellness issues, and you've been consulting them. How does this change for them? Number one. Number two, overall, I see a lot of stigma and taboo for somebody consulting, getting an opinion, an independent opinion from a psychiatrist. There is a taboo in India, right? They think that is very wrong. So how does this help? Because it gives me a sense of anonymity. I don't have to come to you. I can just speak to you like this and I'm good. And the last topic, just briefly, if Dr. Bhalla talked about it, about the psychotropic drugs. So you can't still prescribe. So does that change things for you in any way?
Okay, I'll take your questions in the reverse, order so that I remember them all. So the psychotropics can be prescribed. The government has come out with a list of drugs that can and cannot be prescribed. So they have category O, category A, and category B. So category O are drugs that are available over the counter. So there's no issues prescribing those drugs. Category A are category A and B are drugs which can be prescribed provided there's a video consultation, because the government has actually enabled audio as well as text-based consultation. So provided there's a video consultation, category A as well as B can be prescribed. I mean, maybe I need to be corrected a little here with respect to the technical details, but there are a small group of drugs which come under so-called Schedule X, which can be used as drugs of abuse. These include amphetamines and pethidine and methylphenidate, etc., which are used as opiate painkillers or stimulant drugs for children with hyperactivity, etc. So these are drugs that cannot be prescribed via telemedicine. So that's point one. I mean, and the second question was with respect to stigma. That's a very, very pertinent issue in psychiatry. One of the biggest problems in access of healthcare for patients with psychological disorders is stigma. I think Dr. Ravi, somebody was mentioning, I think Mr. Vishwanathan was mentioning about the doctor-patient ratio. One is the availability of the doctors. The availability in India is low. On the other hand, with respect to psychiatrists, even if the mental health professional is available, patients also sort of have a major hesitation in approaching them. So definitely this platform, this kind of paradigm shift where telemedicine has been enabled in our country is going to be a big boon to our population at large. And finally, with respect to your first question about whether once we come out we'll all be like zombies, I hope not, but yes, I take your point, and it is true to a large extent, because even without any major, crisis in their own lives, with just business as usual, 25 to 30% of the population have anxiety of some kind or another. So just the normal challenges of day-to-day life itself, some 1/3 of the population has difficulty facing these challenges. So with this extra uh, bolt from the blue in the form of coronavirus, and taking away their mobility, freedom to step out of the house, impairing so many people's social interaction as well as their livelihood, it's a serious challenge to to the best of us. I mean, in terms of psychologically well-adjusted people, also they also have difficulty in, uh, you know, what do you say, dealing with it, and the same. And I fear that the fear is, my apprehension is that the fear of the virus is only going to go up once the lockdown is relaxed, because then people will be shifting out, and till now whatever was sort of contained because of the lockdown measures will start spreading. And right now I don't have anyone, I work in Kerala, and I don't have anyone who's positive in 30 to 40 kilometers radius. So I'm actually walking around even without a mask sometimes. But I won't be able to do that once the lockdown is clear, because now I'm sort of reasonably sure that there's nobody around me who's positive. But that won't be the case. So even
Sure.
even everyone would be more anxious. So the mental health is going to be sort of an issue for the best of us.
Okay. So Dr. Neeraj, coming back to you, right? Dr. Kiran made a couple of points there. There are obviously patients who are still anxious. They have anxiety, and nothing can be more anxious than a meeting with your cardiologist, right? Because that is a fear by itself, and number two, post the lockdown ends, we still would have a lot of paranoia about who's infected, who's not. Um, would you, as a doctor, then recommend most of your patients, if they are not very critical, not important to see, to probably consult only by telemedicine, and especially the senior citizens, because obviously they're more prone to it right now? Would you put in some kind of a mechanism for that? Would you recommend that?
Yeah. So a couple of points, two things. One is that I think for a first consultation, from a cardiology perspective, and maybe from most clinical perspective, whether telemedicine will be able to satisfy those requirements and lead to a medically satisfactory examination, and also a psychologically satisfying experience both for the doctor and patient, will be a challenge, I think, in most branches of clinical medicine. So that is something I'm not sure how much telemedicine will be able to help us. But definitely for follow-up, for chronic conditions, going once there's a comfort between the doctor and the patient, then we can definitely deal with many issues without physical contact with the patient. Especially with today's ease of uploading documents, with ease of obtaining investigations, where you can also ask the patient to do simple things like do an automated blood pressure and pulse check. So you have all the information. And to do a follow-up examination will be quite easy, feasible, maybe desirable now in the current context going ahead. So I think first consultation is a challenge, but chronic follow-up, definitely telemedicine will play a very big role. Next, I want to also say couple of more things regarding the remote areas where I think Vishwanathan was saying that they're having. I would like to draw your attention whether you're aware of a program called as ECHO, ECHO, ECHO India. This is a program which came from the US. ECHO in the US was being run by a senior of mine from college and also friend. to help get over the hepatitis C epidemic in rural areas of Colorado. And the program was based on video consultation between caregivers at a hub and all the spokes that were around. And this program has been so successful that the program has got even a presidential citation. It's got a governor's medal, and it has been expanded to include global, expanded globally. ECHO is a running platform which is helping patients from remote areas to access medical specialized care, not only in hepatitis C, but in all areas of chronic illness. Right? The third thing I must tell you that here we are talking about whom telemedicine going to threaten. This is also going to be, because we're going to have lobbies now for telemedicine pro and against telemedicine. The Indian Medical Association, the IMA, has come out with a paper opposing the introduction of telemedicine and condemning the use of telemedicine and the commercialization of this by various telehealth providers, which you know have mushroomed. Every day I get a call from at least 2 or 3 because of and saying, because they represent the general practitioners across the country whose bread and butter is chronic conditions, who run family clinics. But I guess, you know, like they say, I think like Victor Hugo says that you can't, once a good idea's time has come, nothing on earth can deny it. But just to give you a perspective, that there are some naysayers also.
I have just the right question for Ravi now. Based on what Dr. Neeraj said, this IMA thing I'm also confused by, because IMA has been sending this circulars quite often that you lose your registration, etc. But using that, adopting this, and programs like ECHO, I think Ravi, you've had similar programs. You've had similar programs.
Doctor, can you repeat where I missed you there? Not been able to hear you.
Which part did you miss, Ravi?
Can you just repeat it?
The whole thing? Okay.
You said, yeah, just repeat the whole thing, please.
Sure. So what I'm saying is, this adoption of telemedicine, making it more friendly so that even the primary first consultation, if it's possible, to happen on the telemedicine platform, right? That means it has to go beyond just plain video. There are other elements that come into play.
Yeah.
If I need a very realistic picture
That's
of
right.
what are the vital signs, and the person talking to me, does he need to come
Yeah.
and see me? This is especially relevant in rural areas.
That's right.
And combining that with the ECHO
Yes.
discussion that Dr. Neeraj brought up, which is more realistic. If you ask me, that you travel to a PHC or a CHC and it has a system like that which is connected to maybe a DH or maybe even a private hospital. How realistic is that scenario? Because I think that is where we'll end up eventually.
I think that's bound to happen, because let's not look at telemedicine in isolation. Let's look at the allied industry that's also shaping up. For example, sensors. You now have sensors which are able to record your body parameters, and pass it on to the caregiver for further analysis. That is one aspect to it. The second aspect that we need to think of is AI. Artificial intelligence, ML, and the digital and the clinical decision support systems of sort. Because I think all of this together brings in a certain value, which is going to be very, very different than what a doctor can actually give you. Take, for example, and like I can give you enough examples, Neurosynaptics. These guys have been working on telemedicine for quite a while now. They have been making entire products plus also running these solutions. You look at Narayana Hridayalaya. These guys have been running the ECG platform, the tele-ECG platform. They get something like 4,000 ECGs for reporting out in a day. You look at Fortis, who is running the Critinext. There are enough and more platforms today wherein this is going to be a reality because of the advantages that it's going to get to you. And COVID, thanks to COVID, people have now seen and I would say possibly tasted what it means to get teleconsultation done, which was till hitherto always saying I would be a lot more comfortable if I go to a doctor and actually look at it. There is also one more angle to it. when I used to go to my doctor, I still remember a guy called Dr. C.H. Mehta. He used to really touch and feel me and look at me and then give a prescription. Today, when I go to a specialist in any of the big corporate hospitals, nobody even touches you. He just looks at the screen, he looks at the paper, and he prescribes the medicine. So in any which case, that touch is being lost. So from that perspective, I don't, given the conveniences and the capabilities that telemedicine will actually bring in for you, I don't think it's unrealistic to expect that telemedicine is there to stay. If I look at remote intensive care, which is far more critical implementation of telemedicine, we have got over 300,000 beds live in the US, and it's only growing.
Agreed.
You look at defense cases. That's where you cannot go to the battlefield, and you also know that you need experts who are able to sort of see the patient over the web and then give prescriptions. So I think this technology is here to stay. Yes, there has to be sort of refinement to it in terms of privacy, security, portability of data, interoperability of data, and stuff like that. But then, yeah, I think the technology is here to stay once people have seen and experienced the benefit that it brings to them.
Excellent. So, Mr. Viswanathan, let's go to you and get, try to make sense of this all, right? You sell to hospitals and hospitals sells to individuals. What's in it for hospitals to continue to invest in telemedicine, right? Because once the locks are open, I have infrastructure, I have OPDs to fill, I have devised my entire world around my physical entity. How will they be interested in continuing this? You're on mute again.
Ravi touched upon a point of artificial intelligence. So telemedicine companies which are coming now, they are not making themselves to be a Zoom video interaction with the patient and the doctor or a video conferencing enablement. It also is about triaging a patient, getting the clinical data, analyzing it. Just to give a statistical data, in our case, we find today that when the case is triaged to the senior doctor, in 38% cases, it's being done between the patient automatically using my bot on the front end. And of that 85% cases, the doctors don't even change the prescription. They just prescribe what the AI has suggested today. Okay, on various specialties. In some specialties, that high is 95%. So what does that mean? It means that the doctor's productivity has significantly increased in terms of seeing a patient and doing a treatment. Right? We have 600,000 cases. There's enough data on the table to know how we are working on it. Last 3 months, we are seeing it's going from 38% to 60%. The machines are learning, and it's learning not based on some generic ideas. It's learning about very personalized way about the doctor, how he diagnoses, the kind of questions he asks, what drugs to be given, what diagnostic tests to be done. So it's very, very personalized. So what we're able to do at a larger cause is actually able to mimic these doctors, because if we need to solve our doctor shortage in this country, it will take another 10 years because we only add 65,000 doctors every year and we have 600,000 doctors to be needed. So that being the case, I think this is one, so all the doctors are seeing the productivity getting improved in terms of, the second thing is when Dr. Neeraj Bala told, and which I want to share, if you look at a hospital OPD today, 45 to 50% cases or more are basically follow-up, where they come and see the doctor because after an event. Now, in a post-COVID scenario now, given that we don't know what's happening and who is an asymptomatic carrier, most of the people won't have to come out of their safety and do. So they will not come. So those who need to, I know hospitals where they have now started screening patients on a telecall who are asking for an appointment. And they're saying, okay, you will do only a teleconsultation, only you will come to the hospital. The target given is not more than 25% people should come to the hospital, because we can't do physical distancing. I don't use the word social distancing. Physical distancing more effective if more patients come into the hospital, into the OPD. I think that is a new paradigm which is evolving, and we have to see that. And that's my view on that. So they will continue to use. I don't think once May 3rd lockdown opens, people will rush to hospitals. I think definitely the older people are not going to walk into the hospital very soon unless they are very, very serious about it and they need to get an admission.
Excellent.
I'm back.
So there are, if you can't believe me, there are almost 20 questions in the queue. for us.
Yeah, so I think we will pick up those.
Yeah, I think we should start picking up those. So first one to Dr. Kiran and Dr. Neeraj. It's also coming from another doctor, so you guys need to stay sharp. So the question is, how can a patient ensure that his condition is fit for telemedicine? I like that question, because how do I know whether it's just another consultation or am I really on the verge of collapsing? Any quick guidelines from both of you, because you actively do this daily, day in and day out, that how can you do a quick assessment that should he call the ambulance or should he switch on his telemedicine consultation?
So the MCI guidelines are quite clear on this. Like I said, that the first thing that a doctor must do, and they've given 4 guidelines. The first, they are context, consent, identification, mode of communication, kind of advice, and type of consultation, whether it's first of all. So 6 things. The most important first thing is context. The doctor's job and responsibility it is to assess whether this patient is fit to continue for teleconsultation or not. Obviously, a patient will not be aware or would like immediate relief of symptoms. Even when teleconsulting is not in vogue, the most often times that you get a call from a patient is when he or she is in distress. And you have to then diagnose whether this is a distress that needs to be allayed in the hospital. It can be allayed over the phone, or does the patient need to go to a nearby clinic? So this is a common situation that doctors are aware of. And we face this problem all the time. Sometimes if you listen to in doctors' clinics or in doctors' common rooms or in in doctors' lounges, the common story is how a cardiac patient called you up at 3 in the morning complaining of loose motions, or that his father is constipated. So patients know that they are distressed, but it's the doctor's job, especially in teleconsultation days, to assess whether or not this is a suitable case for teleconsultation. So the context needs to be decided by the doctor.
Okay, excellent. Dr. Kiran, anything to add to that?
Yeah, I think Dr. Bhalla put it very beautifully, especially about the context. I mean, I wish the guidelines would be a little more clearer on what they mean by context. Not because I'm confused about what they are, but because it's really important to lay it down very explicitly. Because there is it can be a very nebulous entity. So it's a very good question. I will answer it with respect to from the viewpoint of psychiatry. I mean, for example, there are sometimes some of our psychologically ill people who suddenly become suicidal, etc. And sometimes you're not really able to assess how serious the risk of an actual suicidal attempt is in such cases, in many such cases. So it has happened to me that some really serious patients with some serious threats, suicidal threats, they are fine, but some patients who you would have thought were not likely to go on with follow up on those threats, suddenly you hear that a couple of weeks later or a couple of months later, something unfortunate, they have taken the unfortunate step. So such kind of problems will be such problems are already there when you see patients physically also. So when you see them across a screen, I would imagine that such problems will get magnified. Then the second kind of issue is with respect to consent. I know I'm sort of straying away from the original question.
No, you're right. There is a question on consent and privacy as well. So
okay,
how do you handle patient records, which is sensitive data?
Yeah, I will leave it to the technology guys to answer that, I guess. But non-technological part of the thing which is specific to psychiatry, I would like to address. When people bring their family members who are psychiatrically ill, and some of these illnesses are cases where the patient is not in touch with reality. The patient doesn't really want to be treated because he thinks, he doesn't know that he's ill, and he thinks that, you know, the family member or the doctor is either trying to kill him or trying to take away his property, etc. So the issue of consent, I mean, that also applies to people with alcohol addiction. And so this issue of consent is a major issue in these days, because earlier when the patient rights or the concept of consumer rights was not very strong, you just had to hold the patient firm and give him a couple of shots, and within a week or so he sort of he improves, and his sense of reality comes back, and he stops resisting the treatment. But in the Western countries, and even now increasingly in India, it's not so easy as it was in the past. So even with a face-to-face meeting, these issues of consent come up when sometimes the patient can file a lawsuit later on that I was treated against my consent, and there was collusion between the doctor and the family members. So in a telemedicine kind of interface, I would imagine that these kind of problems would also sort of get magnified. Or
so can I make one point?
Sure.
The MCI guidelines are quite clear that if a patient calls you for a teleconsultation, then consent is implied.
So who originates the call?
Who originates the call? Secondly, if you are originating the call, then the patient must give consent in some form which is recordable and which can be kept as a record or as a backup.
Yeah, that's right.
Yes, I'd like to
Doc,
add
one
that.
second. I'll just come back to you. There's a couple of questions, which I want to put to Ravi, because they came as an afterthought, and somebody's asked those questions also. Number one is, Ravi, interestingly, countries with very low control over data privacy consent have done better in managing COVID, which is fascinating. If you look at the record of the countries managing COVID, where we have, where we have overridden our controls, we've done better. But the more important question to you is, I know that the Telemedicine Society of India is doing an evaluation. How serious is this problem of privacy and data security, which Dr. Kiran brought up in his intro? Also, corresponding to that, now, is there a fear that telemedicine platforms will replace hospitals? Is that how it's going to work in the future, or replace the doctor itself, maybe with an AI at the other end?
Let me answer that question. Let me answer it in two parts. First of all, data security and privacy is of absolute importance, because that's not something that you can play with, because there are consequences to it, just the way that you're dealing with financial data. But at the same time, the proprietary and integrity of it has to be maintained. There are certain rules, or like, for example, I was talking to with the Health Stack team, the India Stack team, and they were telling us, saying that they are bringing in certain consent management principles into place by which a patient can give you consent as also revoke consent. So that's a bit more sophisticated way of doing it, blockchain and use of other secure technologies. But notwithstanding that, that's very much in the minds of the administration. So when you design the basic plumbing, this is going to be a part of it, and the plumbing is being developed as we speak, just the way that we did for the financial industry. So the India Health Stack is going to be in the reality in not so distant future. The second question was whether AI and telemedicine will replace doctors. The answer is no. At the end of the day, it's a doctor who actually dispenses the care. The AI, and even if you look at any of the AI, they would only say that this is a suggestion, this is an advisory, it is not a definitive diagnosis of sorts. Finally, the doctor has to make that last call, and therefore, this is a question that has been asked by several radiologists to me in several fora. The answer has always been saying that doctors are there to stay. These tools only aid the doctor in making a decision making, which is more accurate, which is more based on evidence, and also enhances the productivity and the capability of the doctor to do differential diagnosis, where otherwise it could be a challenge.
Okay. I think I agree with you. So we have quite a few other questions, and what I'll recommend is that we probably will get it emailed to us, and we'll probably some of them are directed to each one of you, and then maybe we can just respond to them by email and send it back to the respondents. Dr. Kiran, sorry I cut you off,
No,
and you are a friend of mine, and you might hold it against me later. So I'm going to let you finish what you were saying.
I can, just with one sentence, I can finish what I wanted to say. The implied consent doesn't apply to patients with psychological disorders. Sometimes when they are brought by their family members and they're not in their, in touch with reality. I get your point, Dr. Bhalla, but it's a little. In general, that is what you said is right. But in some cases, so I'll stop there. So
excellent. So we are almost at the top of the hour, and Dr. Bhalla, just few, one or a few lines wrap up from each one of us. We'll start with you. So telemedicine here to stay. What is the future?
Yes, definitely telemedicine is here to stay, just as COVID is here to stay. Definitely, it's a new normal, a new reality. And I think, like a wise person said, never waste a good crisis to develop a new way of looking at things. And as Ravi very rightly pointed out, once we make this leap, there's no going back. It is not going to slip back into the old ways. People will get used to it, comfortable with it, and it's here to stay. Excellent. So how whoever are the players who will going to refine these platforms, I just like to ask Vishwanathan one question. How do we choose between these various platforms? What would you advise us? How would you choose between
that
the
is a loaded question. The answer is behind him.
That question one-on-one, I guess, but
he's going to point to the logo behind him.
No. Which is fair. I see. Just to have an answer to that question, all of us in the industry, there are a lot of players today. Everybody is coming with an idea to solve a problem from their perspective, and all are using the same tools in different ways, and each has a perspective. Hopefully, the one who can seed the idea and get it executed much faster is going to scale much faster. We are a country of 1.3 billion and a world of 7.2 billion people. I think there's enough space for these technologies to evolve and build. So I'm not worried about that perspective from which to use, because it will be a convenience, because you have so many Android phones and you have so many iPhones and so many things that we use. There's so many TVs in the world. So I think that's not a worry. It's this whole thing is going to stay for long. It's going to stay permanently. That's how iPhone created a computer in 2007. I think this is going to create something new for healthcare.
If I may make a suggestion,
yeah.
Since there is a society, the framework, and people like Ravi who are working, to build platforms. Yes. One way to collate and collect all this data on telemedicine is maybe if you could embed the ICD-10 diagnostic.
It's already there, sir.
It's already there.
Yeah,
but then that gives tools for people to.
This was not a platform for my product, so I didn't speak about it. So all of us are working with ICD-10 embedded. SNOMED need to use FHIR protocols being used. HIPAA compliant as and when we need it to be done. Privacy is taken care of very significantly. The consent forms are much detailed than anybody could even think of, given we have an IT Technology Act to comply with. So enough and more being done to ensure that since till 25th March, teleconsultation, inverted commas, was not even allowed. Telemedicine was a very different word. Teleconsultation and telemedicine, there is a big hair splitting which happens. So it was a challenge. So we were very, very sure about what we were trying to do from a clinical perspective and technology. But now we have a little more space, given that there's a legal backing to what we are doing, and that makes it much more easier to do much more.
Excellent. And Dr. Bhalla, you allowed Vishwanathan to give his two-second spiel on the company, which is very well played. Ravi,
I think Vishwanathan, we should connect sometimes later offline. Yeah.
Sure, sir.
So Ravi, your wrap up. What do you think is the future?
No, I think telemedicine is here to stay. What we really need to do is to ensure that AI gets wrapped around it, so that the diagnosis that the doctor makes, we enable them and also bring in a certain amount of productivity, as also try and hit the quadruple aim that people talk about, which is basically drive down the cost of care, drive better outcomes, improve the patient experience, and improve the caregiver experience.
Excellent, excellent. And Dr. Kiran,
Yeah, I concur with all my panelists. I'm very sure it's going to stay, and I think the best use of this platform will be made in psychiatry. I mean, more than other fields, and probably the the missing aspect, which some people believe that they may not they may be missing the physical interaction between the doctor and the patient. That I think Dr. Bhalla has answered, where if people are comfortable with their doctors, they can instead of traveling half across half the city, they can sort of connect up with the doctor. They're okay. They're because they've already met the doctor. They're comfortable with the doctor. So the number of physical visits will come down drastically, but the quality can remain the same. So it's a great boon. Yeah.
excellent, excellent. So just to wrap it all up, telemedicine is here to stay. We might see some modification, some evolution, but now that we've taken a giant leap forward, we will not come back. It's like giving somebody an iPhone and taking it back, so it's not going to happen. Protocols have to be followed. Cybersecurity, privacy has to be taken care. I think there'll still be a lot of, touch points and some friction between the various agencies. We are already seeing at least 2 organizations not on the same page in the medical industry, in the healthcare industry itself. But I think this future, using Digital India, using the health stack, which Ravi talked about, I think is here to stay, and it'll probably be a big game changer. If you look at in the context of the affordability, the access, and the quality of care. So thank you all very much for taking time out. And I know though we are at home, all of us have become busier than usual. And you can't even bluff anymore that I was outside and the signal is not
And no traffic jams also.
No traffic jams, nothing to blame. So you're available, and exactly people know where you are available to make matters worse. So I wish we come out of this lockdown in a very good state, and hopefully we will see more telemedicine going forward. And thank you, Monimita, for setting up this platform, for having us all here. And it was really, really enjoyable talking to you all. Have a great weekend.
And thanks for the wonderful participation by our teams.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you. Thank you all. Thank you. Lovely to engage with all of you all. Thank you. Thank you, Monimita.
Thank you.
Bye.